everyone. So as I wrap out 2018 walkthroughs, I have to come to the John Bauer Tarot. I don't want to leave 2018 without having done a walkthrough of this. So if you watch my channel, you've probably seen a couple of the fable and readings in which I've been bibliomancingly choosing a particular reading, and I like this. The Crow and the Raven. A crow is very jealous of the raven because he was considered a bird of good omen and always attracted the attention of men, as indicating by his flight the good or evil course of future events. Seeing some travelers approaching, she flew up into a tree and, perching herself on one of the branches, cawed as loudly as she could. The travelers turned towards the sound and wondered what it boded, when one of them said to his companion, "Let us proceed on our journey, my friend, for it is only the caw of a crow, and her cry, you know, is no omen." And that's about trying to be something that you're not. Anyways, we got a little distracted from this. But anyways, choosing one of these and then doing a reading with the John Bauer Tarot. And I have really enjoyed this both with you and for my own self. Since I think I started, so this would have been November, through November and December. And really enjoying this tarot so much. And so of course I needed to come do a walkthrough. Of course this is one that does come not as an initial first impressions, but as having actually worked with it pretty straight through the last couple months, and I love it. I do absolutely love it. So this is a Lo Scarabeo tarot deck. It just comes in a typical tuck box. I do like Lo Scarabeo tuck boxes. A, they're fairly sturdy, which is nice, and B, the way, you can't see it because there's a sticker on the bottom, but the way that they do their bottom tucks, you don't get cards stuck in the flap, which is really annoying with tight-fitting tuck boxes. But other than that, I mean, Lo Scarabeo to me makes decent tuck boxes. What else are you going to say about it? I also like Lo Scarabeo cardstock. It's not something that bothers me. I think it shovels well. They tend to be a little bit slimmer than a standard tarot deck, or at least a US tarot deck. So for example, this is the Darkness of Light Tarot, and you can see that it is slightly thinner and just a little bit shorter, but they do tend to be a little more narrow cardstock than what I would consider to be maybe a standard tarot deck. And again, something that I enjoy. You can get more on the table. It's just something I do like, their cardstock. So that's kind of the general basics. Now, I want to pause for a moment and say, generally, this is the point in a Lo Scarabeo deck that I say, and here's the little white book, don't bother, right? Because generally, it is about 15 or 16 pages, in this case, 19 pages of English, or whatever your language might be. If your language is something else that's in here, you get about 18 pages, and that's it. And they're generally fairly common basic meanings of the card. So it's a little white book in the truest sense of the word for most Lo Scarabeo books. I'm going to say that this is one of the exceptions to the rules, because this is not a traditional tarot deck in the sense that this isn't a deck that was painted for tarot. So John Bauer, who is not alive, but if he were, did not paint this image for it to be the image of the Fool, and so on and so forth. These are pre-existing art pieces that have been placed into the framework of tarot. Now, sometimes that works, and sometimes it fails really miserably. In this case, I actually think it works really well. One, I think that his art style, and he is, excuse me, very often was painting about the folklore and the myths of the Swedish people, and so that those images of mythology and folklore lend itself very well to tarot, so that helps. The other thing that helps is that they did do in the in the guidebook, they did reference the images, so that if you get an image and you're kind of like, okay, what's going on here in this magician, they actually describe 3 dark birds perch on the shoulder, neck, and head of a creature kneeling on the ground. The creature looks out to the right. A hand rests on the hilt of a blade. Meanings: assessing the situation, knowing the right moment to strike, being guided by a higher hand, and self-control. Now, very often, if you're comfortable with what each of the cards in tarot mean, you can see that meaning yourself within the cards. You can kind of get yourself there. And very often the described meanings veer off from what I would say would be certainly a Rider-Waite-Smith rendition of tarot, but they kind of can veer a little bit away from traditional tarot meanings in a way that I find really refreshing, because you can still see, in my opinion, you can still see those core meanings there as well. And so in this instance with Lo Scarabeo, I actually think this is really key to touch bases with, because I think it can give you some nuances and some different ways to weave the particular story of the reading if you spend some time with the little white book. So generally, Lo Scarabeo, I'm like, not really worth the paper. In this case, I actually think please use it. It can, I think, broaden the experience with this deck. So that's that. I wanted to make sure I say that, because generally Lo Scarabeo, I say the opposite. The other thing that I want to say is that, because people have asked me this over the last couple months, would I say this is a good beginner's deck? And I would say probably not. I think it's perfectly great for anybody to use, especially if you use the little white book. But you're not, I think, it isn't going to be the easiest way to be introduced to tarot and to get a really firm foundation of the classic meaning, so that you can then start to kind of deviate away. I am one of those traditionalists in the sense that I think that it's extremely useful to have a foundation of traditional knowledge, and from that foundation then you can dive off of the deep end. That's just my particular way of approaching various systems of divination, and it holds true for me with tarot. So is it impossible? No. Get yourself a Rider-Waite-Smith deck to kind of compare and contrast along the way, and this certainly could be your first deck with an extra deck to sort of navigate your way through some of the traditional meanings and references that you would find in beginners decks and those things. But I think that what I do think this deck is worth the time. I think that it is an exploration of tarot in the forest, in the dark of the woods, within the beauty of John Bauer's illustrations. I think that it lends itself for readings that do connect the cards together in a story. I just think that it's a beautiful merging, and as I said, very often I would say more often than not, decks that use pre-existing art are uneasy. It's an uneasy fit, and in this case perhaps there is some uneasy fits, but it's just so beautiful and it works so well that it doesn't matter to me. So I'm definitely coming at this with having really loved my experience working with this, really adore the artwork that's here. The only negative that I have to say about this deck is that I wish that it was larger. John Bauer's artwork is just beautiful. I'm going to put a link in the description box to a slideshow with some pretty music of sort of the full glory of his art and his illustrations, because I do think that this would have been a deck that would have been amazing in a larger size. For sure, I would have been thrilled to have it, say, in the size of the Moonchild Tarot. That would have been a nice size. It's still manageable, but it gives more room for the image. But the truth of the matter is, this is the size that Los Garabio does their decks, and if I had a choice between having this deck smaller or not having a John Bauer deck at all, I am perfectly thrilled to have this. Also, not a huge fan of the top and the bottom. Like, they were going in the right direction by having the artwork with no borders on the sides, because it allows for that sort of feeling of a story kind of winding its way through. But then they put these big chunky borders on the top and the bottom. Now, I'm choosing not to trim these for two reasons. One, I actually really love the back. It feels like an old storybook, so I don't want to lose the integrity of this particular backing. Number two, because I think that it's not always clear exactly, especially in the minors, if you removed, say, even the top border, like, okay, I can see cups are in here, and we could make some guesses, but you would be starting to do some guessing over, until you got to know the cards really well, you would probably be doing some guessing of what number in the suit it was, and what's going, what exactly is the card. And I like to just be able to know what it is without thinking that much. Obviously, you could trim both off. You would have a very small card. But you could certainly do that and then write. Most of the images are of darker tones, so it wouldn't be too hard to write the keywords on here. But I have no intentions of trimming this, just because I like the size. I like the way that it shuffles. It's going to get even smaller in terms of the image, and I don't really want to have to work super hard, at least right now, in knowing what card I'm working with. And also, I love the back, so I'm going to keep those intact. So those are my personal preferences, but that's really the only thing I would change here is I would love these to be larger and minus the clunky large, at least the top border. I don't mind bottoms like that, but if the top was gone and it was larger, it would be perfection. But I will still take this deck exactly how it comes. So this is just the art card at the front, and of course, again, this is the John Bauer Tarot. So this is a tarot deck that is created using the pre-existing art of the lovely John Bauer. John Bauer was a Swedish painter and illustrator, and he was in the end of the 1800s. He died in the early 1900s, actually quite tragically and quite young. He was only 36 years old when he drowned with his wife and their son in a shipwreck when they were moving. And it was really sad because he actually had decided to not take the train because there had been some, I think, wrecks or some problems with the train, so they decided it would be safer to take a ship, and then they ended up shipwrecking and all of them passing away, and he was so young. So I would have, obviously, as with anybody, obviously, but in terms of an artist, you'd think, oh, I love the works that we have here, and so I would have loved to have seen like his body of work continue to grow. He did a lot of illustrations for fairy tales, folklores, and things in Swedish, and he is certainly known for one of them being, I think it was called Among the Gnomes and Trolls, and this is an anthology of stories, fairy tales and folk tales from Sweden. And so this is, of course, quite a timing thing for me. My grandmother is Swedish, and she's passed away, but she was Swedish. And so I, of course, if you follow my channel, I got my DNA checked, and while I expected to find a lot of German in my DNA because of my mother, there's a lot of German on my mother's side, I actually didn't end up with any DNA German. I still have my family history of German, but I don't have the DNA, didn't get handed down, but a good chunk of Swedish and Norwegian makes up the bigger chunk of my outside of the standard for anybody out of Europe, that sort of standard European. But of the breakdown chunks, the Swedish Norwegian was the highest for me, from my lovely grandmother. And some of the Norwegian also, our Irish side actually comes across from Norway, so I'm sure some of it trickled down from there as well. But anyway, so kind of getting in, you know, obviously I love all of my grandparents, but I will say, knowing that I have that extra compared to my brother. Now my sister, she's getting hers done, so we'll see what she got. But I certainly have a nice little chunk of that from that grandmother, and it does create an even extra special bond, just because I was surprised to see how much was there. So this was like wonderful timing to my seeing the Swedish and Norwegian DNA and tapping into this deck around the same time. So that was it's quite a lovely, one of those lovely happenstances, as they say. So of course we're starting at the very beginning with the Fool. And again, you have this free spirit. He's just plopped down, legs spread, having himself a lunch, not a care in the world. Facial expression is beautiful. One of the things that I really love about John Bauer's artwork that I don't think entirely comes across in this printing of it, and this is my opinion. I have one of his books coming so that I can compare it a little bit better, because it's really hard to compare, let's say, artwork on the internet, because that can be brightened. That has to do with your monitor. There's a lot of factors at play. I obviously haven't seen any of the originals. Many of his were made for illustrations in books where at least at the beginning of his career, they were using very limited print palette, because it makes it cheaper to have printed. So there would be sometimes be black and yellow, or black and one color, or one or two colors. And so that was, you know, that was something he had to take into account in his illustrations. Although as he gained popularity, then there were full color prints that were made as well. So there is sometimes a muted tone. Plus, most of his things are in the forest, and he highlights that murky under the foliage darkness so beautifully. But one of the things, as I was saying, from looking at images other than this deck, one of the things that I feel like you lose slightly in the printing is the luminosity. There is something about, and you get this also in the Bohemian Gothic, is the other tarot that reminds me of this. And also the Darkness of Light tarot, where paying attention to where the darkness is and the light is I think can be a beautiful way to weave your way through this story. The spots of brightness in the midst of the dense forest can be really beautiful. And in images such as the link that I'm sending you to, which again could very well have been altered images, but the way they have been altered really highlights the beautiful luminosity within the dark. And I think that that's something that really appeals to me, and I wish was a slightly more apparent in these images. But anyways, you can see his face of glee and joy, and he's just enjoying his lunch, not a care in the world, with the Fool here. Now, here we have the Magician. And so sometimes you really have to look. It's something I love. He did Swedish folk tales have a lot of trolls and gnomes and things in that. And so there are lots of these wonderful woodsy, earthy creatures in them. And sometimes you have to look to try to say, okay, is this the head? Nope, follow it up. Oh, there's the head, right? Which I love, just to sit there and look at these images. I love the three crows on here, or ravens they may be. They just call them three dark birds, although they do have a bit more of a hook beak there. But he looks as if he is in control. Like there is a controlled, like he could sit like this for an age, right? He could just sit here for 100 years and wait for that moment. Oh my goodness, Isabel scared the bejesus out of me. So for me, this does represent a creature with a great deal of internal power and having complete control over that power. And certainly the three ravens or crows or birds of prey give that sense of magic and power for me as well. this is one that I believe I've seen. There's a couple of them, of these paintings that I have seen before, just in terms of having studied folklores and folk tale. I have read some of the Swedish, in the past, read some of the Swedish tales. And so I have bumped into some of his images prior to getting the John Bauer tarot, and this is certainly one that's recognizable. And it's, to me, as a high priestess, it's beautiful. There is an air of innocence, but also an air of power. And you just think that she's going to slip into the waters of the high priestess. Her hair acting as the veil that you often see in the high priestess card. And this one is one of the ones I think that shows, you have so much of a darkness of both the landscape and even in the water. Like, this looks to be in the middle of the dark woods, and she literally glows. Like, she provides that light in this particular, and you can see even the light of her seems to shine off of these trees. The light source in the painting seems to be her, and you get a lot of that that I think could have maybe been highlighted a little bit more in the printing. I kind of wish for that. But again, I haven't seen the original, so this could be more on target to the originals than not. I don't know that. This is just me speaking. But that's one of the beauties, I think, of this deck, is the way that way that the light source against the darkness is just so stunning. Here we have, what's beautiful is that here we have a similar image, right, with between the high priestess and the empress, and yet I feel like there is a difference between these cards, whereas I feel like she could slide into, and that she literally glows. Now, she is also the light, but you see more of a light everywhere here. There does seem to be like the sun could be overhead in the middle of a glen, whereas there is a sense of almost radiating power that's lighting up the trees around her. And this, again, some of this I can overlay on top because I know this is a high priestess versus the empress. I don't get the sense that she's going to drop into the water. She's got the bird on her finger. She's at one with nature. She's comfortable in her surroundings. I think it's a beautiful empress card, and I think that the two of them are really a beautiful, there's a mystery here that I think that we can think of with the high priestess. Whereas there is a earthiness and a connectiveness and a comfortability that we see here in this empress. So I just love those. The other thing, this really highlights two things. Again, you can see the stark contrast between the light and the dark, which is something that, in terms of reading with it, it really lends itself to pulling the eye around the reading in a really beautiful way. So that, I probably will say that more than once, because I do think it's one of the powers in this deck in terms of reading with it. But as you also see a lot of comfortable, like a child, a small, and again, with these giant trolls, even a adult human size would probably seem to be small. But there seems to be this moment of looking into the eyes between a child and a larger creature, and this sort of comfortability, this sort of walking hand in hand with the myth, with the story, that I think is just, it's really strong. Because one of the things that I love is that here we have the Emperor, which is of course solid, rock solid, square, foundational, right? But there could be an argument made for this little girl, and the way that she's just standing there comfortable, and she's holding up her crown, and so there's this beautiful juxtaposition between which one is the Emperor energy in this card, and of course, yes, you can make a case for that, and it's 100% valid, but yes, I think you can make a case for that energy permeating this child as well. That is just, gives me goosebumps. It literally gives me goosebumps to talk about it. I love this. Again, I know I can't do this because this is what happens and I end up with humongously long videos. But the Hierophant, right? There's these two children and they are sitting with this, and again, the same juxtaposition. Are they going to tell him the stories of their youth? Is he telling them the stories of his forest? Is it a combination of the two? Does that intersection of mentorship go back and forth? Do we learn as much as we teach? Beautiful synergy here. But just as a Hierophant, these children coming to learn what the earth has to teach them, as the guidebook says, is, I think, gorgeous. And yeah, entirely works. Beautiful Lovers card. They're kind of doing these really sort of formal dances that you think about. You've got the white flowers that are there. You've got birds flickering ahead. There is this connection, right, between two things. Now, what I love is that I read the Lovers card as a decision that needs to be made, incorporating the higher self, which I can see in the birds, the conscious self in the man, and the subconscious self or the unconscious self in the woman. So that works really well for me just as a visual, but then it looks beautiful as a Lover's card as well. Love this. Love this. So the Chariot is my birth card. He's on this giant I don't know, ox or some kind of a pack animal, right? That he is sitting on top. It's moving. You get the sense that nothing is going to, so once this starts moving, there's nothing that's going to get in its way. It's just going to plow through mountainsides, right? So I just love it. And he's just sitting there confident that he's going to get where he needs to get to. Love this. This is possibly, and I know I say this in many cards because it's hard, because each one has for different reasons, but this is potentially one of my absolute favorite strength cards. This little girl with her nose on the bear. Of course, bear is a powerful totem for me, so it gives me extra goosebumps, but it's just stunning. It's a stunning, very apt depiction of the strength card, of that complete connection. There's not a struggle against that. There is a union between the inner strength, the primal self, and the outer physical self that's just beautiful. And then even this idea of healing that can come with strength is just there. It's just stunning. Absolutely stunning. Oh, I love this deck so much. Beautiful. This is one of the cards that I had saw. I will put a link. I think Ania did a walkthrough of this deck, or her first impressions of it, I believe. She is Swedish, and I think she's certainly high up there on the list as to why. A, it was folklore. I couldn't resist. It felt very earthy. It felt very into the wild woods. B, it does touch into my Swedish heritage. And then, C, I think I saw her first impressions of it, and it was like, okay. And she had, I think, some in her Instagram feed as well. So I'll put a link to that below also. But this was one of the images that I just found in love with. I mean, this is the Hermit, carrying the light on her head. She's not even holding a lantern. There's this beautiful wreath with the light lighting up her way in the dark night. It's just beautiful. It's beautiful. Here we have a very powerful wheel card. I think this reminds me in many ways to the Druidcraft wheel card, where she's drawing the circle in the sand. There is this very strong sense. Look at all of these little fairy creatures, right? But he seems to be this control of setting those boundaries, of setting things in motion. It's just beautiful. There is definitely a power and a magic there that, again, if you Google the Druidcraft Wheel of Fortune, I think you'll see how that same sort of casting a circle feel, even though this is a circle of Fae, is there, that I think is gorgeous. Like, see this juxtaposition, and sometimes it's the trolls and things in the dark with the others in the light, but in this case you actually have this side is so dark with the little child down here, and you have the side with the troll or creature in it in the light. But there's always this gorgeous juxtaposition between light and dark that I think is so worth working with in this particular deck. This is the Justice card. And he's sitting before a hag. They're having a conversation, fair and balanced. She's going to sort of cast her judgment, perhaps help him find his way home. But again, it's that I love the balance here between the light and the dark. Next we have the hanged person instead of the hanged man, because again we have a young lady or fae or subtype who is hanging out of the tree with her hair hanging down, and of course he is looking up. If he didn't look up, he would have missed it, right? So it's that change of perspective that's going to let you see something fresh. They both actually have a fresh perspective. She could be laying up and looking into the sky. He could be just walking straight by and not seeing her, but it is in that change of perspective in which they see something new, something wondrous, and perhaps something magical. Love this. Look at this death. Two maidens stand in opposition. Each holds a barrel in their hands. It looks like they're offering making offerings for the night sky, which you can see that there is a doorway here. So they just sort of standing at the entrance into this, stepping into this next phase. That is beautiful. Again, you can see the luminosity of these figures against the darkness of the night sky. It just speaks to everything within me. Temperance, a water creature who's solid on the ground, right? Large and solid and weighted, but walking and just as comfortable within the water. So you get that sort of usually you see like fire and water. Here I think you get more of that balance between earth and water, but being very comfortably balanced between the two, I think is really gorgeous here. Here we have the Devil card. So a black cape figure. Now, if you look at the image that, if you watch the walkthrough of, or the video of some of his images put to music, which I highly recommend, you can see a little bit more details. Again, I don't know whether they have tweaked the images, but you can see a little bit more details in him in that. But you do have the sense of a dark fae, right? He's got red clothing. He is trying to hold on to too many things. He's grasping at too many things. So you get that sense of graspingness, trying to hold on to too much, trying to cling to things that aren't serving you in some way. And so there is this need to let go to be able to then regain control again of yourself there. Or you can also just go with, it looks like a dark fae, right? It looks kind of creepy, dark fae flying in there. But there we have that. Here we have the beautiful Tower card. The lightning's in play. It looks like things are falling. There is definitely the sense of conflict or difficulty brewing, but at the same time, there is that sense of meeting it full on, and the sense of illumination. Again, all of the darkness, and the lightning is actually causing the illumination to be able to see a little bit more clearly things that have gotten out of balance. So it works really well as a Tower card, in my opinion. Absolutely stunning. One of my favorite paintings here of his, which is gorgeous. This is a Star card. He's kind of slumped and tired. It looks like he has ridden a long way, but his horse looks like full-on alert, helping to guide him. All he needs to do is look up and be navigated by the stars. It's just beautiful. It's just beautiful. This is a real iconic image. There's actually two from the same story. I think these are ones I've seen before as well. And I think they were both used in the same story. And so there's her riding the moose, and then there's another one where the moose is guarding over her sleeping form. That those are definitely very iconic images of John Bauer's. And I think, again, as the moon, it's gorgeous. It's the moon card. What else do we want, right? Here we have the sun. Again, there's a sense of strength here, confidence. He's carrying his load. He's marching forward. I really like this sun card. It really stands out in the foresty kind of tones that you're seeing, night tones. There is something that it just pops out as being very bright in sunlight. It's not a baby. It's a young man who is confidently moving forward. Happiness that's coming out of mastering and going just kind of forward in his life in a beautiful way. It works gorgeously. In some ways, a very traditional looking judgment card, right? You have the angelic creatures here. You have the people below. It's obviously not an actual it's not an actual resurrection, although we do have them like sort of wrapped around by plants. We do see that they don't have any clothes on, which we do typically see in the judgment. So it does have this idea of kind of rising up and heeding the call of the angels that you typically will see in the judgment card. Love this world card. I love that the shape of her dress and the reflection make that sort of shape that you often see in the world card. I like that we do have not the laurel wreath, but we do have that look of things framing either side with the tree. But there is, again, the sense of balance. There is a sense of completion. There is a sense of stepping into a new, stepping into the doorway, which I always think of with the laurel wreath. That yes, you're there for completion, but now it's time to step to the doorway and start all over again. So it just works really well. It's beautiful. So that is the major arcana. I think that A, they're stunning, B, that they work really well. Yes, you have to look a little bit deeper and think about them, but I think that's really good for your brain. And they just can tell wonderful stories. So there we go. That's the majors. So that brings us to the minors, and I will try to pick up. Of course, these are the major archetypal energies. You always want to spend a little more time on them. But here we have the Ace of Cups. I'm going to keep the aces out so we can put them together. But you do see a lot of big barrels. You see water pouring down. Again, they do speak to what they're trying to do here. Feeling refreshed, overflowing emotions, putting your gifts out into the world. It works really beautifully. Two of Cups, I think, that makes sense. I don't even think you have to think twice about that as a Two of Cups. And it's just gorgeous. Again, love this image. In some of the larger versions I've seen of this, she does, again, have that sense of glowing in the light. I really love this Three of Cups. These three unlikely people that are just journeying together. They're supporting each other, and they're off and doing their thing, which I love. Four of Cups. I think she's lovely. I don't think that she looks particularly sad other than that her face is down, but I don't think she's like weeping or anything. I know the Four of Cups can be boredom for Rider-Waite-Smith. For me, it's stable emotions, and everything looks rocked and stable. We've got the sun coming up. It's just a really beautiful Four of Cups. Look at this Five of Cups. I love this Five of Cups so much. We have sort of like, I know it says that it's a man kneels at the foot of the woman, but this man has to be, in my opinion, a mer creature. I don't know. There's something about the hair. I do believe there is this sense of loss that perhaps either her lover has gone, my lover's gone. What is that? Is it a Dido song? My lover's gone. It's so sad. Anyways, like somebody that's lost her lover to the ocean and has come to sit by the ocean and drop flowers into the water. It's a Five of Cups. news, folks, brokenhearted. Or it's the sense that this is a mer creature and she's a creature of the land and they can't ever quite make it, and the sadness that comes there. It's just beautiful and romantic, and I love it. Now, this was an interesting one for an illustrator who has so many images of children. I would have expected, I suppose, with the Six of Cups, to have had been really easy to do a more traditional childhood through the eyes of a child, seeing the world full of wonder. The guidebook talks about this as these couple that's kind of remembering, coming back into that moment when you're first saying hello to the person that you have fallen in love with, those first flush of emotions, and kind of stepping back into those memories, which certainly works as well. Here we have the Seven of Cups. This is a different Seven of Cups, right? We don't generally see, we normally see the Seven of Cups where obviously you have all these choices in a cup. But it is a card of illusion. So let's see what they say here. 7. A young boy hides from the horrible creatures that run around him. A hag waves a stick high in the air, screaming words. Oh, here's the little boy. I didn't even see him. So here's the little boy here. This is not a card I've pulled, so I'm glad to take a closer look at this. Here's the little boy hiding behind. And all of this stuff, right, could keep him stuck here. But if you even look at them, they look ghostly. Like, are these real things that are taking place, or are these illusions? Being able to tell between reality and illusion here. So it certainly works. Again, you have to step into the image a little bit, but it's a beautiful exercise. I love this Eight of Cups. Look at this. A man stands naked, his face bowed, his body faces away. A crowd kneels before him. One woman turns her body perpendicular, making a statement. Turning away from the mainstream, trying to journey beyond what is known, a change of heart. See, look at this. Like, everybody seems to be ignoring him. He is on the outside. I don't think of him as, like, she's little and he's huge. Like, I do feel like this is a giant or something of that nature. And while everything else is almost shunning him, leaving him vulnerable, this sense of feeling vulnerable and not being seen, and yet she is choosing to turn towards him. She's making a choice to step in a different direction. I mean, how powerful is that? Is it the typical Eight of Cups? No, but the nuance is there, but then it takes it to another place depending on how you see this particular scene. I find it to be an extremely powerful Eight of Cups. Here we have the Nine of Cups. Of course, this is the happily ever after card, and we certainly see this here. The smiling giant is holding up the lady who's dressed in her finery. You certainly have a sense that in this story, all things have kind of worked out together in a quite lovely way that you don't always see in fairy tales. And then the Ten of Cups. Again, we just have that sense of richness. We have the sort of the king and the queen together. It's just a beautiful, it just feels very a Ten of Cups happily ever after as well. I know this is the wish fulfillment card, and then the happily ever after card, and they both have those energies. And then that brings us, I think I have these mixed up. No, I have them right. So here we have, yeah, I do have them mixed up. The Page. So in this deck, we have this happens in many Los Garabios, where we have a sort of a page, we have a knight here with the horse. The queen has a more of a headband here. I love this image. Oh, and then the king has a more upright crown there. And so it doesn't really take too much. This one sometimes throws me off a little bit because it still looks like a knight helmet, and so you kind of think about that as, oh, that's a knight helmet, and your head just goes right to knight, whereas you want to look for the horses to be able to do that. So they, looks like they are going to learn from this giant which direction they need to go. We have the knight, a typical knight on a horse, which is lovely to see. It's very recognizable. Again, I love this. I do feel like we're seeing the Five of Cups. Maybe like she has descended into the water and she's now going to be the queen of the water. This is where my brain goes, right? You just kind of feel like he's now in his element and she's down in the element. In some way it's all going to work out. I don't know. Many ways in which you could read these things. And then we have the king, looking very much the king. We have the child. We often see a child with the King of Cups, and so we definitely have that sense of, you know, still going out and connected to his emotions and to his to the children. It's just beautiful. And that brings us to the Pentacles. Love that. I know I have to speed it up, but these are just all so wonderful. I'm going to keep the Pentacles out just because I'm curious to see them together. Love this Two of Pentacles. I think this is gorgeous. I don't think this is immediately tapping into the general Two of Pentacles that you see with the juggling pentacles that you often see. It says a young maiden stands before two cloaked figures. She holds something in her hands as if she were offering it to them. The cloaked people bow their heads in reverence. And this says time to make a choice, expansion and balancing responsibilities. I don't entirely see, I will say with this image, that it helps to know what the Two of Pentacles means. And this is a good example. I think the other ones are as well. I do think that having a strong base of understanding of tarot will help you when the art it doesn't fit quite so easily into a traditional meaning for the Two of Pentacles. But the Two is about growth. And Two is about expansion. And the Pentacles are about earth. And so it does seem, we have the 1 into 2. We have the 2 that maybe are going to gain something from her. We have her maybe going to turn over what she has in her hand. And that is going to then go out and expand and go further. It's just so many things that you can do here. So I will say, I don't think that this is necessarily the easiest of fits for the Two of Pentacles, but you have two choices when that happens. One, fall back on, okay, well, you know that it means about balancing things. You know that it means about, if you read Rider-Waite-Smith, that it means about juggling things and deciding what are you going to focus on, right? Because the whole point for me of the Two of Pentacles isn't so much what you're juggling, but you got to put something down so that you can choose to focus on it. And she's got this one thing that she is focusing on. So she's already, it's like it's after that Two of Pentacles where she's set down the things that might distract her so that she can, you know, focus in on that one, the things that are important. So you can work your way there and find that, I think, in beautiful ways, and then allow, when it's working with the other cards, to just add to the story as well. And here we have the Three of Pentacles, which is often working together. Now, you certainly have all of these people, and we have a group of people that are working together under the benevolent gaze of the Queen. With him kind of coming forward to kiss her feet, it looks a little less like a teamwork thing that's going on there. But we do still have that general connotation. The Four of Pentacles, we definitely have a nod to the Rider-Waite-Smith with the sense of greedy treasure hoarding troll here that we normally see. But this can also, I can do my own thing that says this is just not a time for you to be spending your money. This is a time to be putting your money into your coffers and not kind of pouring your reserves and resources out into the world. So it still works for me. Here we have the Five of Pentacles. What's interesting, though, is that whereas you see normally where the person needs to go into the castle, in this case, she seems to be going out on a journey. Like this isn't a place she's going to be. And so she's taking those steps into going where she needs to go to. So resources may not be great, shaky 5 number. She may have to leave the castle, but she hasn't given up hope. And she's going to start to make her way to where she needs to go. So it works for me. And I think it's interesting the way that it's sort of the opposite, especially if you think about princesses and queens and fairy tales. And oftentimes, you know, they don't have any choice about, you know, towers that they're locked into, or men that have overtaken the tower and taken them on, whether they wanted that or not. So there's a lot of nuances that you could do with that one. This is a really interesting image here of his paintings. So here we have the 6 of coins, and it says, a woman with long golden hair stands naked. A nun reaches out with a cloak in hand, meaning that the balance is restored. She's lending a helping hand. She is giving charity to this person who has is in need of help. Now, whether this is this queen after a long journey and having lost all that she had, but this balance is starting to be restored, and we have that sense of charitableness that you think of with the 6 of coins. Love this image. I love his images that just have lots of trees and hill, you know, little rock formations and things. It's just one of the things I love. But here we have the 7 of coins. The trees are growing tall. It's just really beautiful. Because the harvest and the growth here is the depth of the forest. I love it so much. Oh, 8 of coins looks hard at work. He looks like a fey tinkerer or something at that hand. You know, some kind of crafty fey person perhaps out in the woods. But he is working hard at his craft. Here we have the 9 of Pentacles, which we normally see the beautifully dressed woman with the bird. So they certainly found an image to work there. Here we have the 10 of Pentacles. So this is that lovely idea again of generational, of things that you're doing that are going to perpetuate onward. And we have this sort of passing on of knowledge, passing on of stories. Think of this perhaps as an old storyteller, but you see the different age groups in the way in which this might continue to perpetuate forward. Here we have the Page of Pentacles, who looks quite interesting. I don't know about this guy. He walks across a cobblestone path carrying 2 bags in each hand. He is cloaked, hunched, and focused on his task. So he is learning. He's really paying attention. He's got to learn. He might be a little bit nervous. How am I going to handle these resources? Because I'm just kind of starting out on this journey, but I'm going to pay attention. He doesn't look very youthful like a page, but, you know, what can you do? Beautiful Knight of Pentacle. I love that thick horse neck and everything. It's just gorgeous. Love this Queen here of Pentacles. Again, all these earthy trolls. She shines like a light, a literal light. And again, if you see this in other images, she just really glows. Just beautiful. And then again with the King of Pentacles, which one? Which one? I'm not going to repeat myself, but I love those kinds of questions. Here we have the Ace of Wands. Recognizing her own power, even in the dark of the woods. That's pretty cool. So here we have the 2 of Wands. We can see that she's set some plans into motion here with this army that seems to be going off onto the path. And then I love, you know how you often see on the 3 of Wands, like the guy who's looking out to ocean. I love this little gnome that's, you know, literally got his hands up over to his eyes as he's looking out to see whether his what he's put into motion is going to come back. Love it. Love this 4 of Wands. This is interesting because this doesn't have the connotation of sort of stopping and celebrating that you normally, I should say, I love the image. I don't know that I love it as a Four of Wands, but I love the image. Two riders sit on a horse as it races through the woods. Somehow, one of the riders maintains their seated position near the horse's head, racing towards a destination, homecoming, doing it your way. So there is not, to me, again, this doesn't fit very closely with the traditional Four of Wands, except for that there is that sense that they are going towards that final destination. We often see the castle up there, and then we know that they're not quite there yet. And so they're kind of going forward to that point in which the Four of Wands is preparing to celebrate. They're anticipating that moment of celebration when they get there. So I think that this takes a different connotation. And even when you're looking numerologically, with 4 being this idea of stableness, but 1 being a fiery pushing, outward pushing energy, we see that they are actually quite well solidly seated in the midst of this forward motion. So that idea of how do you remain grounded and strong and stable in the midst of fiery, out-pushing energy that we think of as fire. So again, there's ways there, folks. There's ways there. I love it. And it just makes you think things through. And I think, again, that's not a bad thing to have your brain have to reach a little bit. I don't think is a bad thing whatsoever. 5 of Wands, we certainly have this person with a wolf pack. We certainly get this idea of disruptive energy with this. 6 of Wands, not too hard to have that sort of coming forward in celebration, and he's sort of riding forward as the victorious person who's coming back from war. It certainly works in that context. 7 of Wands is interesting here. We have a small group of armed people stand near a cliff. They're ready to battle a tall ogre which stands in front of them. The ogre looks to be confused. And so this is about defending your ground. But again, which way is it, right? Is this ogre confused and having to stand its ground against these people who are just coming to attack him? Or is it the other way around? Which I love that questionable. Which way are we going here? Which side is up? I love it. I got this in actually a few readings. This beautiful 8 of Wands, which is normally that fast-moving energy here. We actually have this beautiful, like, wind goddess or wind fae of some kind, right, that is moving. But this is about manifesting creativity, mastering creativity, the strength of this character, the strength of how seated they are, how strength of this standing so groundedly on her buttocks. There's many ways in which this, I think, works. And like I said, I've received it in a few readings and really enjoy that card. Love this 9 of Wands. The 9 of Wands is that idea of you're almost there, right? And again, it can go both ways. Is she going to enter into the forest and she's sort of paying the offering? Or is he needing to make his way through, and this is like one last test that he needs to, there's always tests and things in fairy tale stories, and maybe this is his final test that he has to pass so that he can find his way home. So many things you can do with that. 10 of Wands, I love this. This is all these creatures, right? And we have the sleeping, illuminating, sleeping body here. And so there is, to me, there is a sense of a circle of protection and holding their duty to protect this. Now, of course, you could look at it more sinisterly, but that's how I choose to see that with the 10 of Wands. This is the only page I will say so far that to me really embodies that page energy. So I do really like that one. All of the knights, I think they've done a beautiful job with. All of the queens, I think, are just stunning. And the kings, I think, have worked really well as well. Even though this is an ogre or a troll king, he still looks very kingly. My beloved sword suit is next with the Ace of Swords. I just think it's gorgeous. I love her. I love the interaction here because there is this potential and then there of this newness here, this bright spark of this little child, and then you have this regal, very authoritative energy here in the fullness of his power. And so you're seeing both this potential spark that an ace embodies, as well as the full potential that the ace embodies. So I think that's gorgeous. Two of Swords. This is interesting, right? He has got to, he is stuck, right? His pathway forward has been blocked, but he is going to have to fight his way forward, which is quite interesting. So it's saying in the book, being faced with a block, make a clear decision now, and keep moving forward. he's got to make that choice quickly. There is a serpent. Three of Swords here is definitely in the more Rider-Waite-Smith tradition, with the look of heartbreak here. A red-haired maiden cries over a slain swan. Off in the distance, a boy wearing black watches her. Heartache, feeling the loss of something important, is there. Again, also, there's some kind of an experience that has happened here. There's a story beyond this. And for me, the Three of Wands is about learning from an experience. Yes, it often in tarot cards shows a painful experience, but we can also learn from positive experiences as well. So I can still work with it, even though it is quite Rider-Waite-Smith on that one. Four of Swords seems to be at the end of the, the Four of Swords, they are generally taking a break. It's the idea of kind of stepping back and relaxing, but it seems almost like, okay, it's the call to come back now in some way. Here we have the Five of Swords. This is an interesting one because we have this little maybe gnome creature or troll creature who is watching. Sometimes this is known as sort of victory at what cost. He's hiding behind a rock, stares at a bow or dagger at his side. Being aware of your surroundings, waiting for an opportunity. So this isn't the opportunity for him to accomplish what he wants. It's disruptive energy. So wait until the energy is right. I actually like this for the way that I read tarot with the the numerological 5 with the idea of the mind. This actually works really well for me. Here we have an interesting Six of Swords. You normally see somebody in a boat that is clearly going away from a battle, but they are making their way out of that situation. And here we have somebody who's clearly leaving a difficult situation. She's literally leaving bloody footprints on the ground. So she is making her way away from whatever has happened over here. So that works really well. I love this. I've gotten this in a couple as well. The Seven of Swords is that whole idea of oftentimes you're seeing somebody stealing swords. For me, it's simply the card that says there's so much more going on than you know what's happening. So here we have this knight. We have a castle up in the clouds. We have this pathway going forward. We have so much that you can not know what's happening, right? Has he successfully made his way down? Is he successfully going to try to make his way up? There are so many unknowns here, which is often what, for me, the Seven of Swords stands for. But also the number 4 is about growth that comes from stability. From the stable ground builds this castle in the sky. So it works. It works. Be willing to stretch. Here's that other famous image that I believe came from the same story, where we have the Eight of Swords. But I really love this because we have this protective moose. So she, in some ways is lost or trapped out in this field. I don't believe that she's trapped by the moose. Let's just make that clear. For me personally, she's just in her mind. She's trapped in her mind in some way. And she's going to have to find and make her way out of it. Stories of falling into sleep and disappearing into fairy, or in some way she's trapped in an enchanted sleep. And it's going to be up to her own mental power to bring herself out. But I love this idea of this moose standing guard while she does so. It's just beautiful. Love it. Nine of Swords, the Nightmare card, this certainly can work with that sense of, oh, she's scared, she's covering her face with her hair. But I think it's just, there does have a sense of she's overwhelmed. And that's, for me, the number 9 is a lot of energy, and there's a lot of energy, and she's feeling quite overwhelmed by all of it, and it works for me. Here we have the 10 of Swords, which I love. Can we just say, we've got a bird, we've got a rainbow, we've got a strong person standing here. The number 10 for me is a culmination of the suit of the mind, and this person looks like they have taken all the things that they've learned through the 10s and are stronger for it. And that's, you know, give me hallelujah chorus here. Another great page. So 2 of the pages are like, and then 2 of them I think actually work quite well. All of the knights, again, I think are just wonderful. All of the queens are beautiful. I love the birds here. I love the sense of air here. I love the black and the white. And then here we have the King of Swords. So yeah, I'm a huge fan. I do think that sometimes you run into those difficulties that you do with pre-existing art, where sometimes you're like, where are they going with that? But if you take it as an opportunity for your mind to play and explore, if it's worth it, you know, if you love it enough that it's worth it, allow your brain to take a stroll. Like, that's just a fantastic thing. And I have just loved working with this deck. It shuffles beautifully. It's low Scarabeo. Again, as a riffle shuffler, low Scarabeo cardstock is lovely. I still haven't decided. I need to edge it probably, because it does all this color and all this color, and then the sides doesn't entirely do it, but I don't want to go gung-ho. So I probably am going to have to take these cards in and try to match this maybe green on the side, just to get a real pale green going in some way. I'm not entirely sure. That's why it's not done. Now, I've just been doing 3-card pulls for the most part, and you've seen me do a whole bunch of those, so I'm going to keep this video short and not do another reading. I just wanted to put a couple cards down, though, but that's mostly what I've been doing with this, has been 3-card readings. Now, that makes a nice, you know, sort of beginning, middle, and end of the story. There's a lot that you can do with a 3-card reading, and it's really beautiful. And it works because of the not having the side borders. It works really well. So I'm just a fan of this deck and 3 cards. I think that it just makes a beautiful reading experience. However, there is a reading in the guidebook. No, I found a reading, and I will put a link to it in the description. I got to remember. I know I'm horrible about it. I need a couple links. A link to the video, a link to Ania's video, and also a link to Ethony. So Ethony, who makes lots of fantastic spreads, she has a story spread. I think it's just called a story spread. Yeah, it's called a story spread. So I will put a link to that in the description, but I did do a couple readings with that for myself, and this worked really beautiful for that. I'm just going to lay it out just so you can see how it looks. And again, I'll put a link to that reading below. But you have the protagonist, so you. This kind of represents yourself. And then the second card represents a challenge that you might have, because of course every story needs to have a challenge. And then you have an opportunity that is presented. A way forward with a star card. And then you have what's going on around you, the environment in the story that's going on. You have the reward. Why are you doing all of this? That's a great reward card. And then the final is the outcome, or where things are headed. So this has been a spread that I think is, again, sort of made for this type of deck. And so I've done it, again, a couple of readings for myself with this and enjoyed it. So I wanted to point it out. And again, I'll put a link to that reading in the description box below if you want to try it. So there you have it. This is sort of my look at the John Bauer Tarot, again, after having used it for a while. I'm just a huge fan. Keep in mind, I'm a huge fan of folk tales. I'm a huge fan of fairy tales. I'm a huge fan of storytelling. And I do think that this is a deck that invites you in to tell the story. Now, some people, that's not the way they want to read. They do want things to be more precise and to be very clear about what things mean. And in general, I also like that about tarot decks, but this deck, to me, if you don't like the idea of finding your way to the meaning of the card or linking the cards together and telling a story, this may not be the deck for you, just in terms of reading. It may be more of a collectible if you like John Bauer's art, but I think that there is more here than just a collectible. I do think there is actually a really beautiful reading experience if that's something that you enjoy. So I hope that this helps you to decide whether or not this is the one for you. But after all of the lovely readings I've had with it, I certainly wanted to do a walkthrough for you. Have a wonderful day.